Since the dawn of our existence, emotions have been our constant companions. Before we built cities, before we wrote laws, before we charted the stars, we loved, we feared, we rejoiced, and we mourned. Across every continent, through every age, emotions have shaped the human story. They have built bridges between strangers, driven us to create beauty, fueled our greatest dreams, and sometimes led us into darkness. In every corner of the world, in every moment of history, emotions have been quietly guiding the course of human life. In this journey together, we will explore the hidden history of the heart. This exploration will take us across vast stretches of time, from the earliest stirrings of emotion in prehistoric tribes to the intricate emotional lives of modern humanity. We will visit ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and China, walk the streets of Athens and Rome, sit quietly in medieval cathedrals and bustling markets, watch the flowering of the Renaissance and the revolutions of the Industrial Age. At every step, we will ask, how did people feel? How did they love, fear, celebrate, and grieve? Through myths, art, poetry, philosophy, and the quiet echoes of ordinary lives, we will trace how the emotions of love, fear, joy, and sorrow shaped and were shaped by the human experience. We will listen to the wisdom of philosophers and poets, hear the silent hopes of farmers and queens, and see how great events, wars, discoveries, revolutions, were not only matters of power and politics, but also of deep emotion. We focus on four emotions: love, fear, joy, and sorrow, because they are the threads that weave through every era, every culture. They are the universal languages of the human soul. Love connects us, builds families, communities, and civilizations. Fear protects us, warns us, sometimes drives us to change, and sometimes to conflict. Joy gives life its brightness, its hope, its reason to endure. Sorrow deepens us, teaches us, reminds us of what matters most. Though the world has changed beyond recognition across millennia, these emotions remain constant, timeless, universal, and deeply human. Our journey is not a race through dates and battles. It is a slow, thoughtful walk through the inner world of humankind. We will move gently through each historical era, pausing to notice how emotions were lived, expressed, and understood. We will draw on modern psychology and neuroscience to enrich our understanding, seeing how ancient experiences still echo in our own hearts today. Above all, this is a journey not just for the mind, but for the spirit, a journey to understand not only how we have changed, but also how we have remained the same. As you listen, there is no need to memorize facts or names. Let the stories and emotions wash over you, like a quiet river flowing past. Feel free to drift, to reflect, to dream. This is not just a history lesson. It is an invitation to connect across time, across cultures, across the invisible bridges of the heart. So, take a deep breath, settle in. The journey through the human heart is about to begin. And where better to start than by asking the simplest, yet most profound question: what are emotions? What are emotions? Before we step into the long corridors of history, it's worth pausing to ask a simple but essential question. What are emotions? They feel so natural, so immediate, that we rarely stop to wonder. They are the invisible forces that color every moment of our lives. The quiet joy of sunlight on skin, the sharp sting of loss, the fierce love we hold for family and friends. Emotions rise within us like the tides, pulling us forward, holding us back, shaping our choices without a single word. But what are they really? Are they instincts, memories, chemical reactions, ancient echoes passed down through generations? The truth, as always, is a little of all these things and something more. The nature of emotion. At its core, emotion is the body's way of responding to the world. Long before we spoke languages or built cities, emotions helped us survive. Fear warned us of danger. Joy encouraged us to seek what nourished us. Love bound us to others, creating the first families, the first communities. Sorrow taught us to value what we might otherwise take for granted. Emotions are ancient signals, evolved across millions of years, not to trick us, but to guide us. And yet, they are not just biological reflexes. Human beings learned, over time, to shape emotion with memory, meaning, and imagination. We don't just feel fear when we see a threat. We fear ideas, futures, possibilities. We don't just love those who protect us. We love art, nature, dreams, even the unknown. Emotion became not just a survival tool, but a canvas for human life. The mystery of feeling. Scientists, philosophers, and poets alike have tried to define emotions. The ancient Greeks saw them as passions, powerful forces that must be tamed by reason. Medieval thinkers saw emotions as reflections of divine or sinful states. Enlightenment scholars sought to measure and classify them, like cataloging stars. Modern psychology and neuroscience see emotions as complex patterns of brain activity, hormones, memories, and learned behavior. Each theory captures part of the truth, but none fully captures the experience of a heart breaking in grief or leaping with unexpected joy. Perhaps emotions are not something we are meant to pin down completely. Perhaps they are more like weather, patterns we can study, but never fully control. They are part of what makes us human, unpredictable, vivid, alive. Emotions across time and cultures. One of the most beautiful truths about emotions is that they are both universal and deeply cultural. Every human heart has felt love, fear, joy, and sorrow, but how we express, understand, and even value those emotions can change dramatically from place to place, from era to era. Some societies celebrate open weeping, others prize stoic silence. Some cultures weave love into every ritual, others treat it as dangerous or distracting. Fear may be seen as weakness or wisdom, depending on the time and place. Joy might burst forth in loud festivals, or whisper quietly in acts of devotion. By looking at the emotional lives of our ancestors, we do more than learn about them. We see the many ways there are to be human. We recognize how our own emotional world, what we cherish, what we fear, what brings us happiness, has been shaped by forces far older and wider than our own lifetimes. Setting out on the journey, as we now begin to trace the history of love, fear, joy, and sorrow, keep this in mind. Emotions are not fixed. They grow, evolve, adapt, just as we do. They are threads connecting you, right now, to every human being who has ever lived. From the first mother cradling her child by a fire, to the modern poet writing in a crowded calf, the same great currents move through us all. Tonight, as we walk together through the vast history of human feeling, you are not just a listener. You are part of the same timeless story. Our next step takes us far back, into the earliest days of humankind, before the first cities, before the first written words, when emotions were all we had to explain the mysteries of life. Mesopotamia, emotions of the cradle of civilization. Long before towering empires rose and fell, there was a land between two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, where the first seeds of civilization took root. Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, was where human beings first began to write, to build cities, to organize complex societies. And along with these outer achievements, they also left behind some of the earliest records of human emotion. In Mesopotamian culture, love, fear, joy, and sorrow were not abstract concepts. They were living forces, woven into every aspect of life. Love, bonds between mortals and gods. For the people of Mesopotamia, love was both tender and divine. The famous Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's oldest pieces of literature, speaks not just of heroic deeds, but of deep, aching love between friends. The bond between Gilgamesh and Enkidu is celebrated with a depth of feeling that transcends mere companionship. Their love shapes the entire course of the epic, turning Gilgamesh's story into one of grief, searching, and transformation. In personal life, love was honored through marriage rituals, fertility festivals, and offerings to gods and goddesses like Inanna and Ishtar, deities who embodied passion, beauty, and the complex nature of affection. Love was seen not just as personal happiness, but as a cosmic force that maintained the balance between human beings and the divine. Fear, respecting the powers beyond. Fear was ever present in Mesopotamian life, but it was not a private shame. It was a necessary awareness of forces far greater than oneself. The gods were powerful, unpredictable, and often quick to anger. Floods, droughts, and disease were understood as signs of divine displeasure. In this world, fear was a form of wisdom, a reminder to live carefully, to honor the gods, to respect the delicate balance of life. Elaborate rituals, prayers, and offerings were ways to manage fear, to plead for protection, and to hope for favor. Even kings, the most powerful men of their age, spoke humbly before the gods, acknowledging that human power was fleeting compared to the eternal forces that governed existence. Joy, celebrations amid the fragility of life. Despite the hardships of ancient life, joy blossomed wherever it could. Festivals were frequent and lively, blending music, dance, feasting, and religious devotion. The Akitu festival, celebrating the new year, was a time of great communal joy. It renewed not only the agricultural cycle, but the emotional spirit of the people, offering moments of shared laughter and hope. Joy was fragile, precious, and fiercely protected, a necessary counterweight to the unpredictability of life. Sorrow, mourning, and memory. Sorrow was no less important in Mesopotamian culture. Death was understood not as an end, but as a journey to the underworld, a shadowy realm ruled by gods like Ereshkigal. Funeral rites, laments, and mourning rituals were profound and formalized, expressing grief not just for individuals, but for the collective loss to the community. The Lament for a haunting poem from this era, mourns the fall of a great city, blending personal and collective sorrow into one voice of mourning. Sorrow, like love, was honored, not hidden away, but given space, ceremony, and words. The emotional legacy. In Mesopotamia, emotions were not private matters tucked away in personal diaries. They were communal, sacred, and openly woven into the fabric of everyday life. Their stories, prayers, and poetry remind us, even at the very beginnings of civilization, the human heart was already deep, tender, and searching for meaning. Ancient Egypt, eternal emotions. In the quiet stillness of the desert, under the watchful eyes of timeless statues, ancient Egypt rose and endured for over 3,000 years. It was a civilization deeply attuned to the eternal, to the cycles of life and death, the rhythm of the Nile, and the unseen world of spirits and gods. And within this deep reverence for order and the afterlife, Egyptian emotions found expression not only in daily life, but carved into tomb walls, sung in hymns, and spoken in prayers that have lasted millennia. Love, sacred, earthly, and everlasting. To the ancient Egyptians, love was more than a fleeting emotion. It was both physical and eternal. Husband and wife were seen as true partners in life and beyond. Tombs often show couples holding hands, embracing, even sharing meals in the afterlife. In love poetry from the New Kingdom, we find language that is intimate, playful, and deeply tender, verses filled with longing, joy, and devotion. And yet, love was also a cosmic force, reflected in the divine pairing of gods and goddesses like Isis and Osiris. Their myth of death, resurrection, and devotion beyond time captured the idea that true love endures even after life ends. Fear, the weight of cosmic order. In Egypt, fear was not chaos. It was the fear of chaos. The concept of Ma'at, the principle of balance and truth, governed every aspect of Egyptian life. To live outside of Ma'at, to disrupt harmony, was to risk not only personal ruin, but the unraveling of the cosmos. Fear manifested not as panic, but as responsibility. To anger the gods, to neglect ritual, or to act unjustly carried spiritual consequences. Even pharaohs were judged, their hearts weighed in the afterlife against the feather of truth. Thus, fear served as a quiet, shaping presence, encouraging order, humility, and respect for the unseen. Joy, reflections of abundance. Joy in Egypt flowed from the river, quite literally. The Nile's regular flooding brought fertile soil and harvests, and in turn brought celebration. Festivals filled with music, wine, dancing, and sacred procession marked both religious devotion and human delight. The Feast of Opet, for example, combined spiritual ritual with public joy, uniting people in shared reverence and relief. Egyptian art and sculpture often show people smiling, embracing, feasting, a reminder that joy, though quieter than grandeur, was always present in their world. Sorrow, the path through death. Sorrow in Egypt was not just grief, it was transformation. The journey through death was central to Egyptian belief. Tombs were not places of despair, but portals to eternity. Mourning was a sacred act, performed by family and professional lamenters alike, often invoking the tears of Isis herself, whose weeping for Osiris brought renewal. Death was never final. Through rituals, spells, and remembrance, sorrow became a way to ensure the soul's safe passage and continued presence. Even in sadness, the Egyptians looked forward to reunions, to regeneration, to the eternal embrace of those they loved. A timeless heart. In Egypt, emotions were not fleeting moments. They were carved into stone, whispered in prayers, and bound to a vision of eternity. Here, the heart was more than a metaphor. It was believed to carry the weight of truth itself. And so, love, fear, joy, and sorrow were not merely felt, they were measured, remembered, and revered. As the ancient sun sets over the Nile, we look eastward to other great rivers, other voices, and other ways of feeling. Civilizations, too, carry emotions in their own rhythms. And in the stillness of the Indus and the chants of the Vedas, we find a new thread in the story of the human heart. Indus Valley and Vedic India, emotion in stillness and sound. Before the philosophies of India were fully born, before temples reached toward the skies, there was a quieter world. The cities of the Indus Valley, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, laid out with almost geometric calm, reveal a civilization built not on conquest, but on order. Its people left no grand statues of kings or declarations of war, only the silence of planned streets, ritual baths, and small, deliberate objects of devotion. And in that stillness, we glimpse an emotional world shaped not by outward display, but inward rhythm. Love in the everyday. Though few written records remain, the emotional fabric of Indus life can still be sensed in their art and structure. Tiny figurines of women, of families, of animals, suggest a culture that valued connection and domestic life. The famed dancing girl statue captures something both youthful and confident, a grace that hints at joy, movement, and even sensuality. Unlike the grand declarations of love found in later texts, here love appears grounded, woven into daily life, community, and care. Fear, in ritual and the unknown. With no deciphered language, we can only observe the physical traces of belief, the presence of fire altars, sacred seals, and ceremonial baths. These suggest a society that held reverence for purity, the cosmos, and perhaps forces unseen. Fear may not have ruled, but it likely shaped behavior, seen in how carefully the cities were organized and how ritual was embedded into urban life. There is no evidence of military fortification. Fear, then, may have been more spiritual than physical, a quiet awareness of the sacred rather than the fear of invasion. Joy, water, order, and celebration. Joy in the Indus Valley seems to have been subtle and sensory. Public baths and flowing water systems suggest not only hygiene, but possibly ritual pleasure, a joy found in cleansing, order, and renewal. There are signs of music, games, and ornamental jewelry, indicating appreciation for beauty, sound, and play. This joy was not loud, but deeply integrated, a gentle rhythm of living well and harmoniously. Sorrow, the gaps in memory. Here, sorrow lies in silence, in the unanswered questions. We do not know how the people of the Indus mourned their dead. There are no monumental tombs, no epic laments, but perhaps sorrow was private, grounded in the earth rather than written in stone. Perhaps the greatest sorrow is ours, that we cannot fully hear them. Into the Vedic soundscape. With the gradual decline of the Indus cities came the rise of a new emotional voice, one not carved in clay, but carried in sound. The Vedic era introduced a new kind of emotional language, ritual hymns, chants, and sacred verses passed orally for centuries. Love became devotion. Fear turned into awe, joy into praise, sorrow into longing for union with the eternal. It is in this sound, in the rhythm of the Rig Veda, in the fire of Agni, in the longing of Bhakti, that we hear the next chapter of India's emotional evolution. Ancient China, harmony of the heart. In the great river valleys of the Yellow and Yangtze, where mist rises over jade hills and silence lingers in bamboo groves, China's ancient civilizations gave rise to a vision of life rooted in balance. Here, emotion was not something to be conquered or surrendered to. It was something to be harmonized. Unlike the dramatic expressions of passion or sorrow seen in other cultures, The Chinese emotional landscape often moved with subtlety, shaped by philosophy, ritual, and a deep connection to nature. It was in quiet restraint, in the rhythm of the seasons, and in the spaces between words that the heart expressed itself. Love, duty, family, and enduring bonds. In early Chinese thought, especially influenced by Confucianism, love was inseparable from responsibility. The deepest love was not romantic, but familial, the bond between parent and child, husband and wife, ruler and subject. To love was to honor, to care, to uphold one's role in the great web of relationships known as the five cardinal bonds. Confucius taught that filial piety respect for one's parents and ancestors, was the root of all virtue. Love, then, was enduring and practical, expressed through daily acts, proper behavior, and unwavering loyalty. Still, poetry from the Tang and Song dynasties reveals personal, tender love, sometimes passionate, sometimes mournful. Verses written by lovers separated by war or distance whisper of deep longing, but always through elegant metaphor and restraint. Fear, cosmic disruption. Fear in ancient China was often the fear of imbalance, of disturbing the natural harmony that governed heaven, earth, and humanity. Philosophies like Taoism emphasized the Tao, the way, a natural order that must not be resisted. To act against it was to invite disharmony, illness, or misfortune. Fear was not dramatized, but it was deeply embedded in ritual caution, in reverence for ancestors, and in aligning one's life with the greater flow. Fear also existed politically. Emperors feared the mandate of heaven could be lost if they governed unjustly. Natural disasters were seen not as random, but as cosmic signs of emotional and moral failure at the top. Joy, nature, simplicity, and flow. Joy in ancient China flowed through simplicity and stillness, in contrast to more extroverted cultures. The writings of Zhuangzi, for example, speak of joy as freedom from ego and ambition. A man might find more happiness fishing in silence than ruling an empire. In poetry, joy is a plum blossom opening in winter, a friend arriving with wine, or the feeling of being carried effortlessly by the wind. Music, calligraphy, and tea rituals became refined expressions of joy, not loud or boisterous, but contemplative and nourishing. This joy was not about stimulation, it was about alignment, wu wei, effortless action. Sorrow, quiet lamentation. Sorrow in China was never far from the surface, but like love and joy, it was tempered. Ancestors were mourned through elaborate rites, with the understanding that grief was not just personal, but societal. Proper mourning periods were mandated, sometimes lasting years, and emotions were given space to be honored, not suppressed. Classical Chinese poetry often speaks of sorrow with profound delicacy. A falling leaf, the passing of time, a moonlit night that brings memories of home. Even great historical events, like the fall of dynasties, were remembered through poetic elegy, heavy with meaning but never melodrama. Sorrow was not something to be solved. It was accepted as a season, a truth of existence, to be held with grace. Harmony as the heart's aim. More than any one emotion, the goal in ancient Chinese thought was emotional balance, the cultivation of the self in alignment with the world. To feel was natural, but to feel well, to not let anger overwhelm, to not let joy lead to pride, to love without possession, to grieve without despair. This was the art of living. As we leave the bamboo groves and mountain paths behind, we carry with us a new kind of emotional wisdom, one not of extremes, but of quiet mastery. From here, we journey west once more to lands of empires and inquiry, where drama and desire would take center stage. But before that, one more civilization waits, on the other side of the world, where pyramids of another kind rise from the jungle, and emotions were etched in stone and sky. Mesoamerican civilizations, emotions in stone and sky. Far across the oceans, beneath a different sun and stars, civilizations rose that shaped their world with towering pyramids, intricate calendars, and mythologies as vast as the sky itself. In Mesoamerica, from the ancient Olmec to the Maya and the Aztec, emotions were not hidden. They were made monumental. Here, feelings found form in colossal stone heads, sacred ball games, and epic rituals that sought to bind heaven and earth together. In these lands, emotion was not separate from existence. It was existence, written into every breath, every offering, every act of creation. Love, bonds beyond blood. Among the Olmec, the earliest known Mesoamerican civilization, love is glimpsed through art, in the tender carving of mother and child figures, in the careful creation of ceremonial objects. Though their language remains undeciphered, the intimacy of their sculptures speaks volumes. Love was lineage. Love was legacy. Later, among the Maya, love expanded into the poetic. Royal couples are depicted side by side in intricate murals, their union symbolic not just of personal affection, but of cosmic balance. Marriage rites blended the personal with the political, weaving two lineages and their destinies together. Yet Maya love was also deeply spiritual, a devotion to the gods, to ancestors, and to the hidden forces that moved the world. Among the Aztec, love could be fierce. In the legendary city of Tenochtitlan, love songs known as Xochicalco, flower songs, celebrated the fleeting beauty of life and affection, even amid a culture renowned for its valor and sacrifice. Fear, the dance with death. Nowhere was the emotion of fear more intimately woven into daily life than here. The Olmec, the mother culture, left behind colossal heads whose staring eyes suggest awe and perhaps anxiety, guardians of forgotten rituals and primal fears. For the Maya, fear was celestial. The movements of stars and planets were signs of divine moods. Eclipses and comets heralded dread events. Rituals, offerings, and sacrifices were ways of calming these cosmic forces, of balancing what might otherwise destroy them. And in the Aztec worldview, fear was both a terror and a necessity. Their mythology taught that the universe had been destroyed and recreated multiple times. Every sunrise was a victory snatched from chaos, and every human heart offered in sacrifice was a debt paid to keep the world from falling into darkness. Fear, then, was not weakness. It was a recognition of life's fragility and an obligation to act courageously in the face of it. Joy, festivals of the living. Yet for all their grappling with death, the Mesoamerican peoples celebrated life with breathtaking intensity. The Olmec appear to have engaged in ceremonial games, precursors to the sacred ball game that would later hold profound emotional and religious meaning. The Maya calendar was rich with feast days honoring gods of maize, rain, and fertility, celebrations filled with music, dance, colorful costumes, and theatrical performances that blurred the line between the human and the divine. The Aztec year was punctuated by nearly continuous festivals for agriculture, for warriors, for the changing seasons. Flowers, music, laughter, and poetry intertwined in these moments of communal joy, where even the most solemn rites were infused with color and celebration. Joy here was not naive. It existed alongside sorrow and sacrifice, creating a full, unflinching embrace of the human experience. Sorrow, blood, and memory. Sorrow in Mesoamerican cultures was profound, but not hidden. The Maya believed in a complex afterlife, where souls journeyed through trials and tribulations beyond death. Mourning rituals involved offerings, incense, and prayers, acts that linked the living and the dead across the unseen divide. The Aztecs, for all their fierce reputation, composed poetry full of melancholy beauty. We only come to sleep, we only come to dream. One verse reminds us, an aching recognition of life's impermanence. Even their monumental architecture carries sorrow, towering temples built for the gods who, it was believed, required both gratitude and grief. Sorrow was not something to be escaped. It was honored, performed, and woven into the cosmic fabric itself. Emotions carved into the earth. In Mesoamerica, emotions were embodied, carved into stone, played out on ball courts, sung to the heavens, and sealed with blood. They understood what many forget, that love, fear, joy, and sorrow are not opposites, but companions, that to honor life fully, one must embrace all its colors, even the darkest ones. As the jungle reclaims the ruins and the stars will overhead, the emotional wisdom of these civilizations lingers, a soft drumbeat in the earth, reminding us of what it means to be alive. Our journey next takes us across time and oceans once again to the world of classical antiquity, where philosophy and drama would shape emotions into something both celebrated and questioned. Classical antiquity, emotions on the stage and in the agora. As the sands of time shifted, a new dawn broke across the Mediterranean. In the sunlit marble cities of Greece and Rome, emotions were no longer simply forces of nature or gifts of the gods. They became subjects of inquiry, performance, and debate. Here, human feelings were not just lived, they were analyzed, dramatized, and immortalized. The stage and the marketplace, the theater and the agora, became arenas where love, fear, joy, and sorrow unfolded in all their complexity. Love, between passion and philosophy. For the Greeks, love philia, eros, agape was a force as mighty and mysterious as fate itself. In mythology, it drove gods and mortals alike into feats of heroism and despair. Think of Helen of Troy, whose beauty sparked a decade-long war, or Orpheus, whose love for Eurydice defied even death. Yet love was not only wild passion. Philosophers like Plato reimagined it. In his Symposium, love becomes a ladder of ascent, from physical desire to the appreciation of pure beauty and wisdom. In the Roman world, love took on many faces. It was the tender bond of familia, the burning flame of amores, and the sacred devotion to the res publica, the public good. Poets like Ovid captured love's sweetness and cruelty in playful, witty verses, while in private letters, Roman citizens poured out intimate longings that remind us the heart has always been restless. Fear, tragedy, and the fragility of order. Fear ran deep through the Greek imagination. Their tragedies, performed in open-air theaters, were rituals of communal catharsis. Plays like Sophocles' Oedipus Rex or Euripides' Medea forced audiences to confront the terror of fate, the frailty of human plans, the thin line between greatness and ruin. To feel fear was not shameful. It was to recognize one's place in a vast, often indifferent cosmos. The Romans inherited this awareness. In a world where fortunes rose and fell with dizzying speed, fear was a constant political and personal companion. The Stoic philosophers, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius taught that fear must be mastered, that serenity comes from accepting what one cannot control. But even emperors, cloaked in power, were haunted by fear of betrayal, of chaos, of the swift turn of fate's wheel. Joy, public festivals, and private pleasures. Joy, too, was vital in the ancient world, celebrated in both sacred and secular forms. In Greece, the Dionysian festivals were vibrant explosions of music, dance, theater, and wine, a surrender to ecstasy, where the lines between mortal and divine blurred. Romans carried this spirit forward. Their calendar overflowed with public holidays, Lupercalia, Saturnalia, triumphal parades, moments when ordinary life was suspended and joy overflowed into the streets. Yet joy was also savored privately. A simple countryside villa, a family meal under olive trees, a well-composed poem shared among friends. Both Greeks and Romans recognized that joy, like wine, was best when balanced. Too much, and it soured into chaos. Sorrow, the wisdom of loss. No civilization escapes sorrow, and in the classical world, grief found eloquent expression. The Greeks saw sorrow as an essential teacher. The tragedies taught that to suffer was to learn, to gain a deeper wisdom, a more tempered soul. In Rome, sorrow became a public affair. Funerary art, grave inscriptions, and heartfelt orations kept the memory of the dead alive. The poet Virgil, in his Aeneid, captured both personal grief and collective mourning as Aeneas wept for his fallen comrades and lost homeland. Through art, literature, and ritual, sorrow was shaped into something enduring, a thread tying the living and the dead, a testament to what had been loved and lost. Emotions as the mirror of civilization. In classical antiquity, emotions were both personal experiences and public spectacles, private heartaches and universal dramas. Through philosophy, they were questioned. Through theater, they were embodied. Through politics, they were manipulated and displayed. This era did not seek to deny emotion, nor to be ruled by it, but to understand it, to give it form and meaning. As marble crumbled and empires fell, the emotional wisdom of Greece and Rome echoed on, whispering that to feel deeply was not a flaw, but the very heart of humanity. Now, our path leads into the shadows and sanctuaries of the Middle Ages, where faith and fear, devotion and despair would reshape the human heart once more. India Classical Period. The dance of emotions in Dharma and devotion. While marble glistened under the Mediterranean sun, across the eastern horizons, ancient India flourished in a riot of philosophies, poetry, and spiritual awakenings. The classical period, stretching from the Maurya to the Gupta empires, witnessed an extraordinary blossoming of thought, where emotions were not merely felt but sacralized, codified, and transcended. In India's heart, emotion was understood as both a worldly experience and a path to the eternal. Love, divine and human longings. Love in classical India shimmered across many dimensions. In Sanskrit poetry, love was exquisitely detailed. Texts like Kalidasa's Shakuntala sang of yearning, separation, reunion, portraying human love as tender, stormy, sacred. Yet, beyond earthly romance, Indian thought elevated love to the cosmic. The Bhakti movement, which began to stir during this era, taught that devotion bhakti, a burning, personal love for God, was the highest emotion. The relationship between soul and divine was painted not in distant reverence, but in the language of lovers, longing, ecstasy, and surrender. In temple sculptures, Love found vibrant physical expression, bodies intertwined not just for sensual delight, but as metaphors for cosmic unity. Fear, boundaries of Dharma. Fear in classical India often revolved around the loss of Dharma, the righteous path. The great epics, Mahabharata and Ramayana, are woven with the fear of moral collapse. Characters fear not merely death but dishonor, the breaking of cosmic order, the betrayal of sacred duties. Philosophies like Buddhism and Jainism, which also flourished during this time, spoke of fear as stemming from attachment and ignorance. True liberation, they taught, came not from denying fear, but from seeing through it. Fear, then, was not an enemy. It was a compass, warning against the forces that could pull a soul into chaos and suffering. Joy, festivals of spirit and earth. Joy cascaded through classical Indian life, in festivals, in arts, in philosophical revelations. The Gupta era, often called a golden age, reveled in creativity, music, dance, mathematics, astronomy. All were seen as acts of divine celebration. Joy was recognized as a spiritual state as well. The concept of Ananda, bliss, is central in Indian philosophy, describing the soul's natural state when reunited with its true nature. From colorful holy festivals to serene meditations, from grand temples to fragrant lotus ponds, Indian civilization nurtured a joy that bridged body, mind, and spirit. Sorrow, the path to wisdom. Sorrow was not shunned. It was embraced as an essential teacher. In Buddhist traditions, the acknowledgement of dukkha suffering became the first noble truth, the foundation of the path toward enlightenment. Classical literature captured sorrow with profound sensitivity. The poignant laments of lovers separated by fate, the stoic grief of warriors fallen in righteous battles, the sorrow of kings losing empires to the turning wheel of time. In every temple bell's echo, in every sunset sigh across the Ganges, India remembered that sorrow was not the end. It was the beginning of understanding. As India's classical world unfolded in layered poetry and philosophy, across the mountains and deserts to the northeast, another mighty civilization was charting its emotional map, the realm of the Han dynasty, where harmony, duty, and inner cultivation defined the human heart. China Han dynasty, the heart in harmony. As India's poets spun verses of longing and liberation, the Han dynasty of China, 206 BC, 220 CE, was weaving its own intricate philosophy of emotion, a vision where feelings were not wild storms, but rivers to be channeled toward social harmony and inner peace. Under emperors and scholars alike, the Han period refined the emotional blueprint of a civilization that prized balance, propriety, and the cultivation of the heart. Love, ties of family and heaven. In Han China, love was inseparable from kinship. Confucian thought, dominant during this era, taught that the highest expressions of love Ren were found in the bonds of family, parent and child, elder and younger, ruler and subject. Filial piety shall, the deep respect and love for one's parents and ancestors, was considered not just a private virtue but the foundation of societal order. Romantic love, though less central, still found its voice in folk songs like those collected in the Book of Songs Shijing, where young lovers lamented their separations under the wide, watching sky. Fear, the anxiety of disharmony. Fear in Han society was often tied to the collapse of order. The cosmos was believed to be mirrored in human society. Thus, personal misbehavior could ripple out, disturbing the very balance of nature. Fear was not about supernatural monsters. It was about failure of duty. A son who dishonored his family, a magistrate who governed unjustly, an emperor who grew decadent. These were sources of profound anxiety. Philosophers like Dong Zhongshu blended Confucian and Taoist ideas, teaching that heaven would signal its displeasure with disasters if human emotions and actions became corrupted. Joy, rituals of harmony. Joy was found not in excess, but in orderly celebration. Han festivals, like the Spring Festival, the ancestor of Chinese New Year, were marked by music, feasting, and ceremonial rites that honored ancestors and seasonal cycles. Joy was also cultivated internally. Confucian ethics spoke of the superior man Junzi finding joy in moral self-perfection, in harmonious relationships, in the simple, daily enactments of virtue. In Taoist thought, joy bloomed from aligning with the Tao, the effortless flow of nature, surrendering to life's rhythms without forcing or clinging. Sorrow, the shadow beneath the mandate. Sorrow touched the Han dynasty often. The fall of the Western Han and the chaos that followed revealed the fragility of even the mightiest empires. Literature from this period, like the plaintive verses of the Songs of the South Chu Ci, captured a sorrow both personal and cosmic. Lamentations for lost youth, fading dynasties, and the elusive search for immortality. Yet sorrow, too, had its dignity. To grieve properly, to mourn ancestors with sincerity, was itself a form of emotional virtue, a way of keeping the world in balance. The heart as compass. For the Han Chinese, emotions were never purely private matters. They were threads weaving the individual into family, society, and the cosmos itself. To feel rightly, with moderation, reverence, and authenticity, was to live rightly. In the heart's quiet chambers, the pulse of an entire civilization could be heard. As the Han dynasty waned and new forces gathered beyond the borders, the world prepared to enter darker ages. But the emotional legacies of these ancient empires would echo onward, shaping the Middle Ages yet to come. Islamic Golden Age, the garden of mind and heart. As Europe grappled with feudal strife and fading lights, a dazzling civilization was flourishing from Cordoba to Baghdad. The Islamic Golden Age 8th to 14th centuries. Here, emotion was not seen as the enemy of reason, but as a companion to it, something to be understood, refined, and even elevated toward the divine. In mosques, libraries, and courts, scholars, poets, and mystics explored the intricate landscape of human feeling, bridging heaven and earth through words, music, and mathematics. Love, the language of the soul. In the Islamic world, love, SHQ, was a concept of profound depth. The mystic poets of Sufism, like Rumi, Ibn Arabi, and Rabia al-Adawiyya, described love as the force that draws the soul toward the beloved, which is God. Their verses spoke of a yearning so intense it shattered the ego and dissolved the boundaries between human and divine. But love was also celebrated in more earthly ways. Epic tales like Layla and Majnun portrayed human passion and longing with exquisite tenderness, influencing Persian, Arabic, and Turkish literature for centuries. Love, in all its forms, was a sacred fire, burning away illusion and guiding the soul home. Fear, the tremor before God. Fear, too, had a sacred dimension. The Quran speaks of taqwa, a reverential fear of God, not as terror, but as awe-filled consciousness of divine majesty. This sense of fearful respect shaped personal piety, legal codes, and daily life. Yet worldly fears also abounded. Political intrigues, invasions, and religious disputes were constant reminders that life was precarious. Still, Within the gardens of Baghdad or the universities of Al-Andalus, there remained a faith that reason and devotion could carve order out of chaos. Joy in knowledge and celebration. Joy flourished in the Islamic Golden Age. Joy in learning, in beauty, in the sheer act of living. Scholars like Avicenna ibn Sina and Al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham reveled in uncovering the mysteries of nature, seeing science itself as an act of worship. Public festivals, Eid, Nowruz, harvest celebrations, filled cities with music, poetry recitals, and communal feasts. This was a civilization that celebrated both the seen and the unseen worlds, knowing that true joy often lay in the discovery that everything, even the heart's tremor, belonged to a greater harmony. Sorrow, the veil of separation. Sorrow, too, found eloquent voice. In Sufi thought, sorrow was the heart's recognition of its exile from the beloved. Worldly suffering was understood as a signpost, a reminder of the soul's ultimate home beyond this fleeting world. Poets like al-Mutanabbi captured both personal grief and broader existential melancholy, giving future generations a rich, emotional lexicon. The Islamic Golden Age wove faith, feeling, and philosophy into a luminous tapestry, one that would echo across continents and centuries, even as Europe stumbled toward its own emotional awakening. Medieval Europe, shadows, chivalry, and the cry of the soul. While the Islamic world soared, medieval Europe moved through dark forests of war, faith, and slow reawakening. Here, emotions were not private luxuries. They were battles between salvation and damnation, honor and disgrace, loyalty and betrayal. The soul was constantly judged, weighed, and tested, both by God and by the unforgiving tides of fate. Love, sacred and courtly. Christian Europe placed divine love at its pinnacle. The ultimate model of love was God's unconditional love for humanity, exemplified by Christ's sacrifice. To love, in this context, meant to serve, to obey, and to offer oneself in humility. But parallel to this sacred devotion blossomed another ideal, courtly love. In the courts of southern France and northern Italy, troubadours sang of romantic yearning, often unattainable, often bittersweet. Knights pledged themselves to noble ladies, not in marriage but in adoration, portraying love as ennobling yet painfully unfulfilled. Love, whether divine or earthly, remained an aching, refining fire. Fear, eternal judgment. Fear in medieval Europe was omnipresent and deeply theological. The terror of hellfire and eternal damnation loomed large in sermons, art, and daily life. Plagues, famines, and invasions only reinforced the sense that existence was a fragile and perilous pilgrimage toward judgment. Yet alongside fear was hope, hope of redemption, hope that through penance, charity, and steadfast faith, the soul might yet find its way to paradise. Fear, paradoxically, became a motivating force for moral growth. Joy, festivals of light in a dark age. Despite hardship, medieval Europe celebrated joy, often exuberantly. Religious festivals like Christmas, Easter, and Carnival provided rare respites of music, dance, and feasting. Even amid rigid hierarchies, there were moments when laughter spilled into muddy streets and candlelit halls. Joy was also found in small, sacred rituals, the lighting of candles at a village church, the singing of psalms, the sharing of bread and wine. Here, joy was quiet, humble, and deeply entwined with gratitude. Sorrow, lamentations of faith and flesh. Sorrow ran deep in the medieval imagination. The grief of Mary at the foot of the cross, the sufferings of saints, the devastation of losing a child or a harvest, all found expression in both art and prayer. Medieval literature, like the haunting poems of the Gawain poet or the visions of Hildegard of Bingen, grappled with sorrow not as a weakness, but as a path to transcendence. In the somber cathedrals and flowering monasteries of medieval Europe, the heart beat on, torn between fear and hope, darkness and light, ever searching for its salvation. Japan Heian period, the aesthetic heart. While wars and crusades raged in the West, across the seas, the Heian period in Japan 794 to 1185 C unfolded in serene, shimmering beauty. Here, emotions were not to be conquered or analyzed. They were to be savored, refined, and captured in fleeting moments of grace. The Heian court lived immersed in an aesthetic world where feeling was the measure of a life well lived. Love, subtle, silent yearning. Love in the Heian court was often delicate, secretive, and bittersweet. Affairs were conducted through the careful exchange of poetry and perfumes, where even a glance or a folded fan could carry oceans of meaning. Works like The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu, often called the world's first novel, portray love not as grand passion, but as ephemeral beauty tinged with inevitable sadness. To love was to understand that all things beautiful must fade. Fear, loss of faith and favor. In the Heian world, fear centered on social disgrace and exile. To lose face at court, to fail in etiquette, to offend in poetry, to misjudge a romantic overture could mean ruin. Fear was quiet, restrained, and devastating. The fear of being forgotten, of slipping unnoticed into the margins of history. At a deeper level, there was also the spiritual fear of karmic consequences, drawn from the pervasive influence of Buddhist thought. Joy, beauty in the moment. Joy was cultivated with exquisite care. The right combination of moonlight, cherry blossoms, and a well-composed poem could lift the heart into rapture. Seasonal festivals, poetry contests, and clandestine moon viewing parties were celebrations of life's fragile splendor. Joy in Heian Japan was intimately tied to awareness of time passing, of leaves falling, of love fading. It was not a triumphant joy, but a poignant savoring of existence. Sorrow, Mono no aware. Heian sorrow had a name, Mono no aware, the deep, wistful awareness of impermanence. This feeling saturated art, poetry, and daily life. It was the sigh as cherry petals drifted to the ground, the ache of a summer ending, the silent goodbye after a fleeting love affair. Sorrow was not resisted. It was embraced as the very essence of life, beautiful because it could not last. In the stillness of Heian gardens and the whisper of silk across tatami mats, Japan nurtured an emotional sensitivity so delicate, so profound, that it would ripple forward into every corner of its future culture. Renaissance and Enlightenment, awakening of the heart and mind. As the Middle Ages drew to a close, the human spirit stirred again. From the shadows of cathedrals and the quiet of monasteries, a new age emerged, one of rediscovery, daring thought, and emotional renaissance. The Renaissance 14th to 17th century and Enlightenment 17th to 18th century marked seismic shifts in how emotions were understood, expressed, and explored. Love, fear, joy, and sorrow were no longer merely theological experiences or social obligations. They became personal, philosophical, even scientific inquiries. This chapter follows how hearts and minds awaken together, reshaping human feeling in Europe and beyond. Love, from sacred symbol to human passion. In the Renaissance, love stepped out of cloisters and courts and into the light of human experience. Inspired by the rediscovery of classical texts and a new appreciation for human beauty and individuality, love was reimagined in both art and literature. Humanism and romantic idealism. Humanism, a cornerstone of Renaissance thinking, placed humanity at the center of the universe. With it came a shift. Love was no longer just divine charity or feudal duty, but also romantic and personal. Petrarch, the Italian poet and father of humanism, famously chronicled his unrequited love for Laura in sonnets that explored not only desire, but also inner torment and longing. In his verses, love was both uplifting and agonizing, a duality that would echo across centuries. Shakespeare, a giant of the English Renaissance, elevated love into the realm of the tragic, the comic, and the transcendent. From the youthful abandon of Romeo and Juliet to the mature reflection in Sonnet 116, love was shown as a force capable of uniting, dividing, and redeeming. Meanwhile, visual artists such as Botticelli, The Birth of Venus, and Leonardo da Vinci captured love through sensuality, grace, and the harmony of form, a blend of earthly and divine beauty. Enlightenment, love and reason. In the Enlightenment, love became increasingly subject to rational scrutiny. Philosophers such as Jean-Jacques Rousseau both idealized and criticized romantic love. His novel Julie, or The New Heloise, revealed love's power to challenge social norms, but also its ability to cause suffering. The Enlightenment also saw the rise of love in personal relationships, particularly in marriage, which began shifting from an economic and dynastic institution to a romantic union. In sum, from sacred to secular, from duty to desire, love during this period grew into a more complex, introspective force, still beautiful, but tinged with reason and restraint. Fear, the unknown, and the unraveling. The Renaissance and Enlightenment did not erase fear. They redefined it. As people looked beyond religious dogma, new sources of fear emerged, from scientific uncertainty to existential anxiety. Renaissance, fear, and the fragility of power. The Renaissance was no stranger to violence and upheaval. As city-states vied for dominance and the church struggled with internal dissent leading to the Reformation, fear remained deeply woven into political and religious life. The writings of Machiavelli, especially The Prince, reflected a pragmatic, even cynical view of fear. He famously advised rulers that it is better to be feared than loved, revealing how emotion could be wielded as a tool of power. Artists too expressed the darker sides of the human condition. Hieronymus Bosch's hellish paintings and Michelangelo's Last Judgment are testaments to a world still gripped by apocalyptic fear and moral reckoning. Enlightenment, fear of the rational and the revolutionary. As Enlightenment thinkers began to question monarchy, religion, and traditional authority, fear shifted again, this time toward the chaos that might follow too much freedom. The French Revolution 1789 was both the triumph and the terror of Enlightenment ideals in action. Hope for liberty soon gave way to the reign of terror, where fear was political currency, and the guillotine a chilling symbol. Philosophers like Edmund Burke began to speak of the sublime as an aesthetic rooted in awe and fear, especially in the face of nature's vastness or social breakdown. In this age, fear no longer belonged solely to the divine. It became psychological, political, and existential. Joy, rediscovery, and exuberance. The Renaissance, with its emphasis on rediscovery and expression, brought with it a new vocabulary of joy, rooted in both intellect and sensation. The joy of human achievement. The joy of the Renaissance was the joy of being human. Artists, scientists, and thinkers reveled in what they could uncover and create. Leonardo da Vinci and Galileo Galilei found joy in observation and experimentation. Michelangelo expressed joy in the perfection of the human form. Cities like Florence, Venice, and later Paris pulsed with creative energy. Festivals, music, and theater became more accessible, transforming joy from a religious emotion to a civic and aesthetic one. Enlightenment, the rational pursuit of happiness. In the Enlightenment, joy matured into the concept of happiness. No longer just a divine reward, happiness became a human right. John Locke wrote of the pursuit of happiness as central to liberty. Voltaire, through Candide, satirized blind optimism, yet insisted that joy could be cultivated in tending one's own garden. Music, especially through composers like Bach, Mozart, and Haydn, captured this Enlightenment joy, structured, elevating, and emotionally resonant. In essence, joy in this era was not spontaneous bliss alone, but the fruit of reason, balance, and self-understanding. Sorrow, the melancholy of knowing. Even in an age of awakening, sorrow held its place. But now, sorrow became more introspective, more philosophical, less about punishment, and more about the condition of being human. Renaissance, the melancholic artist. The Renaissance reintroduced the concept of melancholia from antiquity. Albrecht Dürer's engraving Melancholia depicts a brooding, winged figure surrounded by tools of art and science, a reflection of the sorrow that often accompanies genius and aspiration. Many Renaissance figures, from Michelangelo to Montaigne, spoke of the soul's loneliness and the burden of self-awareness. Sorrow was no longer just a religious lament. It became a personal struggle. Enlightenment, tragedy, and sentiment. In the Enlightenment, sorrow found new expression in sentimental literature and philosophical tragedy. Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Laurence Sterne penned novels that celebrated tears, empathy, and emotional sensitivity. Tragedy in theater, such as Voltaire's plays or Goethe's The Sorrows of Young Werther, showed sorrow as not just inevitable, but redemptive. Sorrow was recast as a gateway to compassion and self-awareness. It no longer simply humbled the soul, it helped shape the moral imagination. Toward modern emotion. By the end of the Enlightenment, the emotional world had been turned inside out. People now wept openly at novels, debated the merits of love and marriage, feared revolutions, and pursued joy not just as spiritual reward, but as political right. Emotions had become subjects of art, tools of politics, themes in science, and mirrors to the self. The Renaissance and Enlightenment, far from coldly rational epics, were periods of emotional intensity and evolution. They dared to ask what it meant to feel, and their answers still echo in the way we live, love, fear, and hope today. Industrial Revolution, emotions in a changing world. As steam hissed through iron pipes and factories etched themselves into once silent landscapes, the world entered a new epoch, the Industrial Revolution. It was a time of invention and upheaval, of labor and longing, of soot and steel. And within this turbulence, the emotional fabric of human life began to fray, shift, and be rewoven. Where once feelings were shaped by faith, community, or monarchy, now they were increasingly pressured by clocks, contracts, machines, and cities. Emotions, love, fear, joy, sorrow, were not lost. They were transformed. Love between romance and revolution. The 19th century saw love wrestle with its place in a world that was growing colder and faster. In agrarian societies, love had long been entwined with duty, religion, and survival. Marriage was a bond of necessity as much as affection. But now, with urban migration and rising literacy, the idea of romantic love took center stage. Literature played a huge role, from Jane Austen's tempered courtships to the wild, obsessive passions in Wuthering Heights and Anna Karenina. Novels became emotional maps for navigating love in modern times. The Romantic movement, in both literature and music, elevated love to something sacred yet deeply tragic, a yearning for connection in a fragmented world. Yet beneath this idealism, industrial love often collided with economic reality. In overcrowded tenements and factory floors, family structures were strained, children worked, couples lived apart due to job demands. The concept of companionate marriage, based on mutual affection, not arrangement, gained ground, especially among the rising middle class. Thus, love in the industrial age stood at a crossroad, a dream of tenderness against the harsh grind of capital. Fear, the machine, and the masses. Few eras stoked as much fear as the Industrial Revolution, both personal and collective. For workers, fear took physical shape. Dangerous machinery, workplace accidents, disease, and job loss were constant threats. The rise of the factory meant the human body was often treated like a cog, valued only in terms of productivity. The ruling classes feared uprisings and unrest as conditions worsened. Revolutions and riots erupted, from the Luddite machine breakers in England to the revolts of 1848 across Europe. Philosophers and critics began to speak of alienation. Karl Marx notably described how workers felt estranged from their labor, from nature, from each other, even from themselves. This was a new kind of fear, existential and soul deep. Technological advancement also provoked moral panic. Would trains rupture the mind? Could women handle telegrams? Was industrialization corrupting family and faith? Fear was not just about fire or famine now. It was about displacement, about losing one's place in a rapidly mechanized world. Joy, progress, possibility, and public life. And yet, it would be false to paint this age only in shadows. The Industrial Revolution also birthed new joys, rooted in modernity, mobility, and imagination. The middle class emerged and grew. For them, industrialization meant access to education, leisure, art, travel, and joy followed. Trains shrank continents. Steamships connected oceans. For the first time, ordinary people could travel, find work, even escape their pasts. Science and innovation inspired electricity, gas lamps, vaccines, photography. All were miracles of their time. There was joy in human ingenuity, in shaping a new world. Public parks, museums, libraries, and music halls became spaces for emotional expression. People gathered, laughed, flirted, argued, and discovered themselves in the shared pulse of the city. This was not the joy of pastoral simplicity. It was the charged joy of speed, discovery, and survival, often fleeting, sometimes overwhelming, but undeniably potent. Sorrow, the price of progress. Still, the price was steep, and sorrow ran like a quiet river beneath the age's roaring surface. The countryside emptied as people flooded into grimy cities. Families were split, traditions lost. This dislocation bred loneliness, especially among migrants and rural transplants. Child labor and poverty scarred an entire generation. Accounts from London, Manchester, and New York depict children dying in mines, sleeping in gutters, working endless hours for pennies. Literature captured these sorrows. Dickens, Hugo, Dostoevsky all wrote of the aching, hungry hearts hidden behind industrial facades. Women, though idealized in romantic fiction, often lived isolated lives, excluded from property, politics, and personal freedom. Emotional suppression became a survival strategy. Grief also took ideological form. As the world modernized, many mourned the loss of nature, of soul, of simplicity. Poets like Wordsworth and painters of the Hudson River School tried to preserve vanishing beauty, sensing that something essential was slipping away. The emotional shifts, new theories, new languages. The 19th century was not just a time of emotional change. It was when people began to study emotions scientifically. Charles Darwin's 1872 work, The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals, explored how emotions evolved, linking facial expressions across species. For Darwin, emotion was a biological legacy, not just a cultural construct. Sigmund Freud emerged at the century's close, diving deep into the unconscious, suggesting that much of what we feel is repressed, misdirected, or tangled in childhood experience. Women's emotions, previously dismissed as hysteria, became subjects of clinical study, often in problematic ways, but signaling a shift toward emotional inquiry. Emotional expression was also reframed through language. The rise of the novel gave individuals a script for inner life, allowing readers to name their longings and discontents. The emotional self, once shaped by myth or morality, was now being dissected, theorized, and pathologized, for better and for worse. Industrial emotions in art, music, and memory. Art, always a mirror of the soul, responded with intensity. The Romantic painters, Turner, Goya, Friedrich, painted desolation and sublime beauty, reminding viewers that emotion still mattered in an iron world. Music surged with passion. Beethoven, Chopin, and later Mahler gave voice to inner storms, combining technical mastery with raw feeling. In architecture and urban planning, a new awareness grew. Could cities be humane? Could spaces be beautiful, not just functional? The seeds of emotional design were planted. Even as industry marched forward, art clung fiercely to the primacy of human feeling. Toward the 20th century, inheriting emotion. By the century's end, the world was no longer what it had been. Emotion had become interior, individualized, and often hidden behind social codes. Yet it was also shared through print, music, and public discourse, giving rise to mass emotional identities, nationalism, class consciousness, even consumerism. Photography and early cinema began capturing real faces, real tears, creating archives of emotion that would ripple into the next age. The Industrial Revolution was not only an age of machines, it was an age where the heart beat differently, where love had to shout above factory noise, where fear wore a uniform, where joy was industrialized, and where sorrow lingered like smoke in the rafters. And though the gears kept turning, the human spirit found ways, in story, science, and song, to remain unmistakably, sometimes defiantly, alive. The modern era, emotions in the age of science and technology. As the 20th century dawned, humanity stood at the brink of transformation. Wars, revolutions, the rise of psychology, globalization, the digital age, all reshaped not just how people lived, but how they felt understood. and expressed emotions. In the modern era, emotions are no longer just whispers of the heart or divine gifts. They are scientific subjects, political forces, marketed experiences, and increasingly, digital commodities. The human emotional landscape has expanded and fragmented. The science of feelings, psychology, and neuroscience take the stage. Before the 20th century, emotions were largely explained through philosophy, literature, or religion. But with Freud, Pavlov, Skinner, and later cognitive scientists, emotion entered the laboratory. Sigmund Freud mapped the unconscious, suggesting that much of human emotion is hidden, tangled in childhood memories, desires, and traumas. Behaviorists like B.F. Skinner looked at emotions as behaviors to be conditioned, something observable and manageable. The humanistic psychology movement Carl Rogers, Abraham Maslow pushed back, emphasizing that feelings were central to self-actualization and meaning. Modern neuroscience, through brain imaging, uncovered how structures like the amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex govern fear, memory, love, and empathy. Today, we understand emotions as complex biological, psychological, and social phenomena, shaped by neurons and hormones, but also by culture, language, and experience. Emotions, once considered mysterious or mystical, have been mapped, yet still, they resist full containment. Love in the modern age, personal and political. The 20th and 21st centuries transformed love radically. Marriage evolved from a social obligation into a union based ideally on mutual love, choice, and personal fulfillment. Movements for gender equality and LGBTQ plus rights redefined who could love whom and what forms love could take. Literature, film, and now social media portray millions of love stories, offering endless scripts for romance, heartbreak, and connection. Yet love is also increasingly mediated by technology, dating apps, texting, virtual relationships. Love has become faster, broader, but sometimes more fleeting. Philosophers like Elaine D. Botton have observed that in a world of individualism, love often carries impossible expectations to complete us, to heal us, to give us meaning. Modern love is freer than ever, but also heavier with longing and complexity. Fear in the modern era, anxiety in a hyperconnected world. Fear, too, has mutated. The 20th century's wars, world wars, Cold War, created a backdrop of existential dread. The fear of nuclear annihilation haunted generations. Terrorism, pandemics, environmental collapse, economic instability. Modern fear is often globalized and amplified by the speed of media. Personal anxiety has become a dominant emotional state. In fact, anxiety disorders are among the most common mental health issues worldwide. Technology fuels this. 24 by 7 news cycles bombard us with crises. Social media heightens fears of missing out, inadequacy, and isolation. Surveillance capitalism preys on fears to drive engagement and consumption. In short, fear today is not just about immediate threats. It's ambient, persistent, woven into the fabric of daily life. Joy, curated, commercialized, and crowdsourced. Despite fears, joy persists, though it, too, has evolved. Modern marketing industries learned early that selling joy sells products. Happiness became a commodity tied to consumption, vacations, gadgets, and self-improvement. The rise of mass entertainment, movies, music, theme parks, video games, created shared spaces for collective joy. Social movements also inspired joy. Civil rights victories, pride parades, environmental activism, and community organizing all carry moments of deep, shared elation. The internet brought new forms, viral videos, memes, online communities where shared laughter and support transcend borders. Yet, paradoxically, the pressure to be happy has led to toxic positivity, a demand to always project cheerfulness, even when suffering inside. In the modern world, joy is abundant, but often curated and complicated. Sorrow, acknowledged and explored like never before. Perhaps one of the most profound shifts is how openly sorrow is now addressed. After two world wars and countless smaller conflicts, grief became a collective experience in the 20th century. Literature, cinema, and later television brought sorrow into public conversation. From Holocaust testimonies to films like Schindler's List, sorrow demanded to be seen, not hidden. The emergence of psychotherapy normalized speaking about sadness, depression, and trauma. Digital platforms today enable people to share grief publicly, memorializing loved ones online, finding support groups, connecting across distances. Modern sorrow has lost some of its stigma, but the sheer scale of modern crises, mass shootings, refugee crises, environmental disasters often leaves people overwhelmed, experiencing what psychologists call compassion fatigue. Sorrow today is global, interconnected, and at times, heartbreakingly vast. Digital emotions, feelings in the internet age. The rise of the internet in the late 20th century and its explosion in the 21st has created a new emotional ecosystem. Emojis and GIFs have created a new visual shorthand for emotions. Social media platforms Facebook, Instagram, TikTok encourage constant emotional sharing, likes, hearts, retweets, quantifying feelings. Virtual reality and AI companions like chatbots and virtual friends now offer emotional experiences that are real, though mediated. Cancel culture, online outrage, and viral mourning show how emotions spread like wildfires online, often detached from traditional relationships and rituals. Psychologists warn of emotional flattening online, when likes and comments substitute for deep connection, but they also celebrate the new opportunities for empathy and solidarity that digital life provides. In short, our emotional lives are now entangled with technology, enriched, distorted, amplified. Toward the future, emotions and AI. We stand today at the edge of yet another revolution, the emotional revolution of artificial intelligence. AI can already detect emotions through facial recognition, voice patterns, and even analyze emotional content in writing. Emotion AI is being deployed in marketing, customer service, healthcare, and even in therapy apps. Philosophers and ethicists ask, can machines ever feel? Should they mimic human emotions? Some scientists believe AI will soon provide emotional companionship, while others fear that outsourcing emotional labor to machines could erode human empathy. Meanwhile, neuroscience continues to probe deeper. What are emotions? Really? Are they programs, patterns, or something ineffably human? The emotional frontier is no longer just biological or cultural. It is now digital, ethical, and existential. Conclusion. Emotions, endlessly evolving. From ancient myths to neural scans, from whispered prayers to viral tweets, human emotions have remained constant and yet have constantly evolved. In the modern era, emotions are scientific objects to be studied, commodities to be bought and sold, political tools to be wielded, personal truths to be cherished and shared. As we race into an uncertain future, one thing remains clear. To feel is to be human, and no machine, no revolution, no change in time can ever fully erase the mystery and beauty of the human heart. The future of emotions, technology, AI, and the changing heart. As we look beyond the present moment, one truth becomes clear. The future of human emotion is at a crossroads. Technology is not just reshaping how we live and work, it is beginning to reshape how we feel, express, and even understand our own emotions. Will emotions remain the most intimate, uniquely human part of ourselves? Or will they become something different, co-created with machines, amplified by algorithms, curated by data? Let's step into the unfolding landscape of emotional evolution. Emotion AI, teaching machines to feel. Across industries, scientists and engineers are racing to build emotion AI, systems that can detect, interpret, and even simulate human emotions. Algorithms now analyze facial expressions, voice tones, body language, and word choices to gauge emotional states. Customer service bots can detect irritation and adjust their responses. Mental health apps offer empathetic conversations, even if the empathy is synthetic. But the question remains, is recognition the same as experience? Machines can mimic sympathy, offer tailored comfort, or mirror excitement, but they do not feel joy, grief, or longing. At least, not yet. For now, AI remains an emotional mirror, but not a heart of its own. Virtual companions, new bonds, new questions. Already, millions interact daily with virtual assistants, chatbots, and AI-driven companions. Programs like Replica create AI friends or even romantic partners. Virtual influencers, AI-generated personalities, garner millions of followers. Elder care robots offer companionship to the aging in countries facing demographic crises. These interactions satisfy real emotional needs: loneliness, boredom, a desire for understanding. But as relationships with machines deepen, society faces profound ethical and existential questions. Can love exist without consciousness? Does emotional fulfillment require mutuality? What does it mean for the human heart when affection can be programmed and purchased? As we create more emotionally responsive technology, we must ask, are we enriching human connection or replacing it? Emotional labor in the age of automation. In the service economy, emotional labor, managing feelings to create a desired customer experience, has been essential. Now, emotion AI threatens to automate even that. Retailers are testing emotion reading checkout systems. Therapists experiment with AI-driven counseling platforms. Teachers, coaches, and even doctors face competition from emotionally intelligent bots. On one hand, automating emotional labor could ease the burden on overworked humans. On the other, it risks devaluing genuine human empathy, turning care into a service performed by a script. In a world where feelings can be packaged and performed by machines, will authentic emotion become rarer, more precious, or more suspect? Neurotechnology, engineering emotions directly. Perhaps even more revolutionary than AI is the rise of neurotechnology. Brain-computer interfaces (BCIs) aim to read, influence, or enhance emotional states. Neurostimulation is already used to treat depression, PTSD, and anxiety. Experimental technologies hint at a future where mood enhancement could be as simple as flipping a switch. Imagine a world where sorrow can be erased, fear muted, joy dialed up like volume on a stereo. Would we still be human if our emotions were programmable? Philosophers warn of a future where emotional authenticity is sacrificed for emotional optimization, where suffering is seen not as part of life, but a problem to be fixed. If we can edit the heart at will, what becomes of resilience, meaning, and growth? The language of emotion, shifting meanings in a digital age. Language, our oldest tool for expressing emotion, is also evolving. Emojis, GIFs, memes, all serve as shortcuts for feelings across cultures and languages. AI-generated poetry and music explore emotional experiences created by non-human intelligence. Mood itself has become a branded, curated concept, tailored playlists, mood rings, apps to set your vibe. As language compresses and accelerates, will our emotional expressions become simpler or richer and more nuanced in new ways? Already, younger generations express complex emotions in hybrid forms. An emoji and a single word can carry layers of irony, affection, or sadness that would take paragraphs to explain. The emotional vocabulary of the future will likely be more visual, rapid, and layered, but perhaps also more ephemeral. The resilience of the human heart. Despite these dizzying changes, one thing seems unlikely to change: the stubborn resilience of human emotion. Love will still drive sacrifice and creativity. Fear will still protect and warn. Joy will still burst forth in spontaneous laughter, celebration, and wonder. Sorrow will still deepen our compassion and tether us to each other. Technology will evolve. Cultures will shift. Even biology itself may be edited. But the fundamental pulse of feeling, of caring, of yearning will endure, because emotions are not just reactions. They are the threads that weave meaning into life. And no machine, no matter how sophisticated, can yet touch the wild, unpredictable, aching beauty of the human heart. Conclusion. Standing at the crossroads. We are the first generation to glimpse a future where emotions could be mapped, engineered, even commercialized at a scale never seen before. But we are also the generation that can choose to use technology to deepen connection, not replace it, to preserve the authenticity of feelings in a world that often seeks to optimize or monetize them, to remember that emotions are not errors in our programming. They are the programming that makes life vivid, meaningful, and deeply human. The heart will evolve. It always has. But it remains, ultimately, ours to guide. The future of emotions is unwritten. It is, fittingly, a story we will feel our way through, together. Conclusion. The everlasting power of love, fear, joy, and sorrow. Throughout every era, across every civilization, four great forces have quietly shaped the human story: love, fear, joy, and sorrow. They are older than language, deeper than memory. They pulsed in the hearts of the first humans who gazed at the stars, who painted stories on cave walls, who sang lullabies to their children by firelight. Love, the great connector. Love has been humanity's greatest act of defiance against loneliness, against death, against the limits of the self. It has bound families, inspired nations, birthed art and literature, fueled revolutions. Across time, love has changed its forms, from sacred duty to personal choice, from whispered prayers to digital confessions. Yet its essence remains: the longing to know and to be known, to reach across the space between two souls. Fear, the guardian and the shadow. Fear has protected us, sharpening our senses, urging caution, preserving life. It has also imprisoned us, building walls of suspicion, inciting violence, stalling progress. In every age, fear has adapted, from predators in the dark to invaders at the gate, to invisible threats carried through wires and words. Yet even now, fear speaks the same ancient language. Stay alive, stay aware, stay connected. It reminds us that vulnerability is part of being human, and that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Joy, the bright thread through time. Joy has been the spark that lifts existence from survival into celebration. It is the laughter shared around a table, the dance under open skies, the sudden breathless awe at beauty. Joy flourishes in freedom, but also bursts forth in the darkest hours. Proof that the human spirit is not so easily extinguished. From ancient harvest festivals to viral videos that make millions laugh together, joy persists as a rebellion against despair and a reminder that life, even when hard, is still precious. Sorrow, the deep river beneath all things. Sorrow has given weight to love, meaning to memory. It is the ache of loss, the echo of absence, the shadow that shapes the light. Every civilization has sung sorrow in elegies, laments, whispered prayers to the departed. And yet sorrow, too, has its gifts. It teaches empathy, patience, humility. It binds us to one another, across borders and generations, with the quiet understanding that to live fully is also to grieve deeply. The unbroken thread, across prehistoric fires and glittering cities, handwritten letters and instant messages, painted caves and glowing screens. These four emotions, love, fear, joy, and sorrow, have remained. They are not relics of the past. They are not impediments to progress. They are the very fabric of what it means to be human. As we move into futures shaped by science, technology, and unimaginable change, these feelings will evolve, but they will not vanish. Machines may predict emotions, cultures may reshape them, brains may enhance or alter them, but the beating heart, yearning, trembling, rejoicing, mourning, endures, and it will continue to endure as long as there is life to feel it.